Some years ago, when my kids were little and we were watching them play in the garden, my dad turned to me out of the blue and said, "Enjoy them now while you can. Pretty soon you won't be their hero anymore." Through the faint stare at their playful antics, I sensed a nostalgic melancholy in his voice. A brief, contemplative silence, typical of the profound simplicity in father-to-son speak. Those words stayed with me for some time afterward. Fast forward a decade, I was living alone and only seeing them a few days a fortnight. In between visits, I would miss them terribly, so when they were with me, I would cram 2 weeks' worth of togetherness into 4 days. Kids generally end up with their mothers, for lots of reasons, some good and some bad. Divorce is always traumatic, particularly to children, and all the more so when they're afforded power they are not mature enough to wield. When given both the power and the choice to do so, they'll usually pick the softer option. More freedom, less discipline, less accountability. To be fair, that could be either mum or dad, depending on the parent's individual values. I would expect the stricter of the two should be the dad, for all the classic archetypical reasons, though in this day and age, it can just as likely be the other way around. Nevertheless, it's been said that the father's role is to push his children to be the best version of themselves, to judge and admonish them to grow into responsible adults, to hold them accountable. Not an easy task and thankless, usually exploited by the other parent and a constant source of anguish and frustration to the more responsible one. Being the stricter parent has consequences for you too. It is harder to monitor their education and exert any restrictive, let alone punitive influence, and it's very easy to push them away when you try. The entropy of fading influence accelerates the longer they are out of your orbit. They become gradually estranged, despite your best efforts and appeal to reason. They no longer see you as the mythological wise king, but as the tyrant. And not even the wisdom of Solomon will help you salvage that trajectory. When I think about my father's words, they were definitely prophetic. On further reflection, even more strongly in my case than his, given the unnatural and polarizing nature of options given to children in divorced families. Maybe some parents cooperate well to maintain order, but in my observations, they usually don't. It's easy to fall into a funk, especially if you take your fatherly role seriously. Adhering to your principles seems out of fashion these days, and kids have never willingly accepted accountability. When confronted by responsibility, they will flee to the soft option almost every time. The more you try, the faster they run away. All you really have on this earth are your principles and the consistency with which you apply them. Sometimes that can seem the loneliest place in the universe to dwell. But at some point, you need to stop blaming yourself. Accept that there are circumstances beyond your control and come to terms with them. If you live by your values, there is no other option for you than to stay the course, come what may. The future will judge you, often harshly. You will no doubt make your fair share of mistakes, but any regrets you have will not be based on shame. If your values insist that your purpose is to equip your children with traits of character that will give them resilience, meaning, and value to our society as mature adults, then the payoff for you is not in the present, much as you may wish. Losing your influence over them now, while they are still reasonably impressionable, is the heartbreaking sacrifice you have made as an investment in their futures. In this topsy-turvy world, if they only ever encounter one man who is their rock of Gibraltar, then let it be their father. They may blame you for all of their future failings and unhappiness, but they'll never accuse you of being wishy-washy. Were you to cave in and drop your expectations of them to the lowest common denominator for the sake of having them choose to be with you more, it would ultimately cost you more than just their esteem. It would rob them of the example of responsibility and accountability that you demonstrate daily, and it would leave you ultimately living in this uncertain world without that basic currency of manhood, principles. Some personal development teachers talk about how our feelings are a compass that tell us if we're acting in alignment with our values or against them. If we feel bad, we need to make changes to our behavior and our actions so that we may once again feel good. But this to me seems only superficially valid. Sometimes we make decisions that cause us a lot of pain out of a strong sense of duty and responsibility, in the selfless hope that our loved ones will benefit from them. It is a sacrifice in its truest form, a warrior's sacrifice. We cannot tell the future, nor can we always make the wisest and surest of decisions. But we should, as men, always act from our conscience, for the greater good, whether or not those children will someday come back and justify all that quiet despair we suffered by becoming the kind of adults we hope they would become. And yet, we live in the hope that they will, sooner rather than later. Many people, including my father, comfort me that they will. I hope he's right.